Let me tell you something strange about love. Not the kind that burns fast and ends loudly, but the kind that never begins at all. You've probably met someone like him, a man who seems composed, successful, always in control. The kind of man who listens more than he speaks, who knows how to charm a room without ever letting it in. People call him mysterious. Some call him cold. But underneath that calm exterior is a story, a quiet, complicated psychology. See, the man who never loved didn't wake up one morning and decide to be unfeeling. He learned it. He learned that affection is unpredictable, that closeness makes you vulnerable, that to need someone is to risk losing yourself. Psychologists call this avoidant attachment, a survival mechanism born from early lessons about trust. Maybe his parents were distant, emotionally inconsistent, or simply too broken to model intimacy. So he adapted. He learned to depend only on himself, to stay safe by staying detached. Sigmund Freud once said that the adult search for love is really an attempt to repair childhood. But this man never believed in repair. He believed in control. Control became his peace, his religion, his protection. Every feeling had to be filtered through reason, every impulse disciplined into silence. To him, love wasn't comfort, it was exposure. He built his safety in solitude. He built it so well that even he forgot it was a prison. On the outside, it looked like composure. On the inside, it was containment. He replaced vulnerability with performance. He knew how to look affectionate, how to say the right things, how to simulate connection without ever surrendering to it. Erich Fromm once wrote that immature love says, "I love you because I need you," while mature love says, "I need you because I love you." But this man never reached either. He stopped at protection. He wanted affection without dependency, intimacy without exposure. He wanted love to be safe, and love was never meant to be that. There's a term psychologists use, emotional blunting. It's what happens when the brain numbs emotion to protect itself from pain. He thought that numbness was peace. He called it strength. But in truth, it was a slow starvation. He could control everything, except the quiet ache at night, the one that came not from loneliness, but from absence, the absence of ever being fully known. He kept himself busy, work, goals, perfection. Achievements became his anesthesia. People admired his discipline, but they didn't see what it was hiding. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This man lived inside that loop. He didn't know his fear was steering him. He just thought he was being wise. Sometimes he'd meet someone who tried to love him, someone patient, someone kind. But their tenderness only made him retreat. It wasn't that he didn't care, he simply didn't believe care could last. So he'd withdraw, slowly, politely, until they learned to stop trying. And when they left, he called it inevitable, as if losing people was proof of how right he'd been all along. Viktor Frankl once said that love is the highest form of seeing another human being, seeing their potential, their truth, even when they cannot see it themselves. But to be seen that deeply requires surrender, and surrender was something he'd spent his whole life avoiding. He'd rather be admired than understood. Admiration was safe. Understanding was intimacy. And intimacy, to him, was danger. There's another theory in psychology, the fear of engulfment. It describes people who equate closeness with loss of control. They fear being consumed by another's emotions, so they keep their distance to preserve their autonomy. He lived in that fear. He didn't want partnership. He wanted self-preservation. He used logic like armor. He called detachment discipline. But deep down, it was grief. Grief for the version of himself that once believed in connection. Years passed. The world around him softened. Friends fell in love, built lives, grew families. And for the first time, he felt something he didn't recognize. Not envy, not regret, just emptiness. The philosopher Nietzsche warned that when you gaze too long into the abyss also gazes back. And that's what happened to him. He realized he had become his own abyss, an echo chamber of logic, a man defined by what he refused to feel. Late at night, he'd catch himself scrolling through photos of other people's joy, weddings, children, soft, unguarded moments. And he'd feel that flicker, that pulse of something like longing, but it would pass. He'd bury it quickly, the way he buried everything else that made him human. The psychology of the man who never loved isn't about cruelty. It's about fear, the kind of fear that doesn't scream but whispers, "If I let someone in, I'll lose myself." He lived his life mistaking safety for peace, and peace for fulfillment. But the truth is, safety without love isn't peace, it's paralysis. He wasn't incapable of love, he was incapable of risk. And without risk, there is no intimacy, no connection, no real life. Modern psychologists call it emotional avoidance. Philosophers call it the tragedy of self-preservation. I call it loneliness disguised as strength. Because that's what he was, strong but empty, protected but unlived, unhurt but unhealed. He thought love would break him. He never realized that the absence of it already had. And maybe that's the quiet tragedy of our time, a generation that's safer than ever, but lonelier than ever too. Because to love is to risk being seen, and to be seen is to risk being changed. He never risked either, and so he never changed. The psychology of the man who never loved is the psychology of avoidance, the human fear of losing control, of surrendering to something unpredictable, of admitting that we are built to need each other. He wasn't unfeeling, he was just afraid of feeling too much. He wasn't heartless, he was hiding his heart. And that's what makes it so tragic. Because sometimes the greatest wound is not being unloved, it's never learning how to love at all.